Hi, there has been this new thing, SvelteJS. It's actually not that new, but in version 3 it's relatively new and that version changed a lot. Anyways, it's an amazing piece of front-end technology which helps you build modern user interfaces, just like React, Angular, and Vue you might say, and indeed it does, but it brings some unique advantages to the table. A very lightweight and nice syntax, some interesting new features, and it spits out applications which are super small and super fast. In this video, we'll have a first thorough look at it. I'll walk you through its core features, some of its core features, and I also do have a full course on Svelte in case you're interested, where you can learn all about it from A to C, all the way up to deployment, including things like validation, HTTP, state management, all the core syntax features, and so on, animations, and so on, everything in there. So I would love to see you there, but in this video we'll have a first look at Svelte and see how it works and why you should definitely have a closer look at it. Now, in order to dive into Svelte and understand how it works, let's simply create a new project. And for this you'll find a link below the video, of course, where you will find these exact instructions. In the end, what you need for that is Node.js, which we'll use to run our project and also to use its package manager to set up a new project. So visit nodejs.org and download the latest version there. And once you got that, you can just copy this npx command here, which creates a new Svelte project, and run it in your terminal in the place where you want to create that project. And I'll name it Svelte First Steps, but you can give this project any name you want. Now what this will do is it will scaffold out a new Svelte project with all the required dependencies and the required setup you need. And this will go super fast. You can just navigate into this new folder thereafter and now run npm install to install all the required packages this project needs in the folder of that project. And this will also just take a couple of seconds. Now with that installation process finished, I opened this project up in my IDE, Visual Studio Code. And there, if you're working with Svelte, I would strongly recommend that you search for the Svelte extension and install that. It will simply help you a bit with auto completions and basically improve the support you have in Visual Studio Code for Svelte. Now, this is the project we just created. In there, you see a couple of config files. This project uses Rollup, which is an alternative to Webpack for building this project. And in the package.json file, you see the scripts you can start. And there it's the development script which we want to start, as this will spin up a development server and watch all our files for changes and automatically rebuild our project and reload the page in the browser whenever we change something in a file. So let me open up this integrated terminal here in Visual Studio Code and simply run npm run dev to bring up that development server. Now with that started up, you can open localhost 5000 in your browser. And you should see this basic Hello World application, which is the basic starting app Svelte gives you here. Now, please also note something interesting. You only got development dependencies here. And the reason for that is that Svelte actually is not a framework that gives you any code that goes along with your code and runs in the browser. Instead, Svelte is a compiler. That's super important. You write Svelte code, which is basically normal JavaScript code, but following certain rules and using a certain syntax given to you by a Svelte. And then Svelte runs over your code during development, so right before you deploy your application, and it compiles your JavaScript code to a bunch of highly efficient JavaScript instructions, which then run in the browser. And here's how it works. In the source folder, you have the code on which you will work. You have the main.js file, which is the root entry point of your Svelte application. And in there, you see some basic code where we import something from a Svelte file. Then this seems to be the constructor function. We create a new object based on that. We then target a place in our document, in our HTML file, and we'll have a look at that file in a second. And we set up some props. So if you know React, this tells you something. We seem to pass some data into this app component here maybe, but I'll come back to that. Before we have a look at the app Svelte file, let's actually have a look at the public folder. There we have the index.html file because Svelte is a compiler that allows you to create JavaScript applications or JavaScript components, which you can drop into existing applications. And so either way, you need a HTML file where you import your generated script, which will be this bundle.js file, and where you then provide a place for Svelte to hook in and to basically take control over the DOM. Because Svelte is a JavaScript compiler, not a framework, but a compiler that is all about building reactive user interfaces. And therefore, it needs its share of the DOM where it can take control over and where it can control the interface. So we're importing this bundle.js file, which is this JS file. And this bundle.js file, in the end, is just this output of highly optimized instructions Svelte generates based on your code. Now the bundle.js file, as you see here, is not yet fully optimized, doesn't use minification and so on because it's the development and debugging version. But still, you see this here is a bunch of code, and it's not the code we'll write. Instead, this is the code which will be generated, which in the end will do exactly the things we tell it to do in this app Svelte file. Therefore, let's have a look at this file, and what we see here might look familiar to you if you know Vue.js. We have a script tag, we have a style tag, and we have some markup here. This is in the end how you will build your Svelte applications. You build them from components, and this here is one Svelte component. In this case, our only Svelte component. We control the markup which we eventually want to output. Then we have some JavaScript logic, and here with syntax like this, we connect our markup to our JavaScript code. And here we dynamically output the name variable, which is this variable, and we therefore print the value of that in our real DOM. So the world here is coming from this curly brace name thing. And if you're wondering where the world text is coming from, well, in this case, that would be from the main.js file, which sets up world as the value for the name prop, and a prop, well, that's just what we have here. Since this is exported, this is a prop. And that's just one of the syntax features Svelte adds or introduces. It uses standard JavaScript features, but sometimes it assigns a different meaning to them. And for example, by exporting a variable in a component, you turn this into a prop. So now it can be set from outside. So let's actually take this to the next level now to understand this a bit better. And let's assume we would be building a basic online shop here. Therefore, we probably want to have some shopping cart and a list of products. So for this, I'll create a new component here in the source folder, and I'll name it product.svelte. This will be my file name. Now in there, let's first of all write some markup that could define our product. And I'll keep this relatively simple. I'll add a div here, maybe a h1 tag, where I eventually want to output the product title. Then also a h2 tag, where I want to output the price of the product. And then a paragraph with the description. And below that, we probably also want to have a button where we say add to cart. Now, let's also add some styling here. And the good thing in Svelte is that whatever styles you define here, they are automatically scoped to this component. So if I style a h1 tag here in this component in product Svelte, all the styles we define here will only affect this h1 tag, but never the h1 tags in our components, like this one. So therefore, let's go back into product Svelte and let's assign a couple of styles here quickly. And for that, I'll first of all work on my div here and give that some styles. I'll give it a margin of 1 rem in all directions here. I'll give it a box shadow of 0, 2 pixels, 8 pixels, and then RGBA 0.000.26, like this. Give it a padding of 1 rem also, a border radius of 5 pixels, a background color of white, something like that. The h1 tag there, I want to shrink the font size down to 1.25 rem and reduce the margin here to 0.25 rem top and bottom, 0 left and right. For h2, I'll set the font size to 1 rem, also decrease the margin here to the same levels we have on the h1 tag, and change the text color, actually not this gray, but to a dark grayish color, something like that. Last but not least, on the paragraph here, I want to set my margin also down to 0.25 rem and 0. Let's also have a look at the button, and there I want to actually inherit all my font styles so that it doesn't take the default system font Mac OS would otherwise assign to it, but takes my default font I have in the rest of the application. Give it a little bit of padding, maybe 1.5 rem, 0.15 rem from top and bottom, 0.5 rem left and right, something like that. A background, which I want to actually find here in this purple reddish area. I like this color here a lot, so this color look here. A border of 1 pixel solid and that same color, a text color of white. And with that, we should have some styled markup without dynamic data for now, but we can now import this component here into our app component. And for that, we simply go into our script tags, and there you can add an import statement and import product from ./product svelte file. And this .svelte import here will be handled by our rollup config, which will include that component and generate some code instructions that will actually render all our code and styles here into the DOM. However, only as soon as we start using it, because Svelte is really smart and efficient. For the moment, if you go to the bundle here and you search for the description, which we have here in product svelte, right? We have description down there. If you search that in the bundle.js file, you won't find it. So it's not included yet. We first of all have to render our product component here in the DOM of our app svelte file. So in the markup here. And we simply use product here as a new HTML tag, so to say. Of course, it's not officially an HTML tag, and we're also not creating web components here, so the browser won't understand this, but this is not what will end up in the browser in the DOM. In the end, this is just an instruction to Svelte that it will add some code to our bundle to eventually render the product component into the DOM. So now if you save that and you go to bundle.js and you search, well, we don't even need to search, here it is already, description. And here you see, we see no HTML content in here. Instead, these are all just JavaScript instructions that in the end set, for example, the text content of a paragraph to description. And element is just a helper function which creates a new paragraph and so on. So this is what Svelte gives us. And now, more interestingly, if we have a look at the output, this is what we have here. This is our button, this is our card look here for the single product. Now let me go back to the product. And for one, I want to tweak the button here and give it a cursor of pointers so that we have a nice cursor when we hover over this button. And we can also add a hover and active effect here. So let's go to the button here again and add :hover and button :active here. And in there, I'll just add a little bit of box shadow of 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 6 pixels, RGBA 0.26. With that, we should have a nice little hover effect when we hover over that. So that's now our button, that's now our card. Now, of course, we want to get some dynamic data in there because that is in the end what makes our application more dynamic. And we haven't taken care about this at all. So why don't we allow the user to add a new product then? So let's go to app svelte, which is where we use the product. Let's add a couple of inputs here. An input for the title, an input for the price, and therefore of type number, and also a text area for the description. And I'll get rid of all of that but the rows here. So let me maybe add 3 rows here. Now I'll also quickly add some labels so that we know what we're working on. So here we got the title. This will have the ID title then. Then here I'll add another label for the price. And I'll say price here. And this will get an ID of price. And last but not least here, the text area. Let's add a label, description, and give it a text of description, and here assign an ID of description to this text area. Now I'll also wrap these inputs into divs so that each input receives a new line because it's now wrapped into a block level element. Also for the text area, of course. And with that out of the way, this is what we get. Now, this is not super pretty, but it will do the job for now. What I want to do, though, is I'll wrap this into a section here. Could, of course, also just use a div. So put all my inputs into there. And now give this section some styling here. in my app.svelte file. Please also note that the h1 tag I previously styled here did not bleed over into the product component. The h1 tag here was not purple because styles are scoped to the component they are defined in. So now let's add a section here and maybe give this a width of 30 rem and a margin of auto to center it. Now we'll have this look here and give labels and inputs here a width of 100% so that they take the full width I'm giving it here, also for text area, so that they take advantage of the full width I assigned to that section. Now we have all these inputs, and with these inputs I for now want to set the values here on title, price, and description. And later we'll also make sure that we have to press a button to add a new product. Now to connect our inputs here to this component down there, we first of all need to connect the values we're entering here with variables in our app.svelte file. And for this, I will now get rid of this prop variable and add normal variables, which are not exported, so which are not settable from outside. And you do this with normal JavaScript syntax because you always use normal JavaScript syntax here. There is no magic in the syntax. It's just how Svelte sometimes interprets some of your code, that this might differ from normal JavaScript behavior, but that's all Svelte's job, and that's all documented in the Svelte docs and in my Svelte course, of course. And therefore here we just create new variables. For example, title, which initially could be an empty string. And then let's replicate this also for the price, which initially is 0 though, and the description, which initially also is an empty string. Now we want to bind this here to our inputs. And for that, we use a convenient binding syntax. We can set the value here, the value property of the input, to curly braces. And now this is of course a special syntax. That's what I meant. Svelte sometimes adds some new features, interprets some output in a new way. And if it encounters curly braces here, you may also put them between double quotes, by the way, that does not matter. If it encounters that, it knows that now you're about to output some dynamic value in here. Or to be precise, this has to be a JavaScript expression that yields text or a number or a boolean, so something which can be printed to the screen. And here I will simply point at title, so at my title variable, which of course holds a value that can be printed to the screen. Now if we do that and I enter starting title here, you will see that if we save that, this is pre-populated with starting title. Now of course we don't just want to pre-populate it, we also want to store whatever the user enters here back into the variable. So I'll set this back to an empty string and now add an event listener here. And you do this with on colon, another piece of syntax which you could add in normal HTML too, but there it wouldn't have any effect. Here Svelte will actually pick this up and assign a meaning to it. With on colon, you can add event listeners. And you could listen to clicks or to blur, or in this case, to the input event. And then again, you can add curly braces between double quotes or without those, that does not matter. And now here, you don't assign a JavaScript expression that yields something which can be output, but instead here, you have to point at a JavaScript function. And you can simply add that function up here. And I'll name that setTitle and receive my event object here. And in there, I'll therefore set title equal to event target value, because we get the normal DOM event object, which has a target key, which points at the element that triggered that event, and that element here is an input element. Input elements have a value property, and that's exactly what I'm accessing here. So now here, down here, I simply point at setTitle without parentheses, because I don't want to immediately execute it. Instead, I just want to set up a reference pointing at this function so that Svelte can call the function for us as soon as the input event is fired, which happens on every keystroke. Now to see whether that works or not, we can simply temporarily output the title up here. Again, simply with curly braces in the midst of our markup. You can use them in any place where you can output text. So that would be here when you bind to an attribute or property, but also just like here as a text node, so to say. And here I can use my title variable again. And now what you will see is that as I type here, this is a title, you see the title also appear up here. And that is how Svelte works, and that is how powerful it is. Now, what we have here is kind of a two-way binding. We're passing our title into the value prop of the input, and we're also reacting to changes in the input through the user and then store that back into the variable. Now, if you have two-way binding, you also have a shorter syntax available, which I'll now use on the second input here, but we could also use it here in the first one, of course. And that is another special instruction, a directive, which Svelte understands, the bind directive. Bind colon, again, is understood by Svelte because it parses all your markup you're writing here. And you can bind to a property here, and that would be the value property. Now this means that Svelte will both pass data into that property, but also react to changes of it. And here we bind to value, and I want to bind that to my price variable. And that means that whenever this changes, the changes are saved back into the variable, but whenever we change the variable here from some other place, because some timer expired or anything like that, such changes would also be reflected back into the input. And now another special feature of Svelte is that since this is a number, of type number here, it will automatically convert whatever the user enters here to a number. Normally it would be a string, but Svelte will automatically convert it to a number for us. Now last but not least, the text area can also be bound with bind colon value, and here we bind that to description. Now we're getting all these values. The next goal is to pass them down to product. For that, we have to go to the product component and accept these values here as props. Again, if you know React, you know the concept of props. Props are essentially pieces of data in a component that can be set from inside the parent of the component. So from inside the place where you include the component through its selector, which we're doing here in Svelte. To create a prop, well, you already saw that before. We need some script tags here, and then we define variables, like here, product title, and product description, and product price, or whatever you want to name them. I'm just choosing different names than in Svelte for these variables to avoid confusion. Technically, these variables won't clash, so you can use the same names. But here, I'm creating these variables, but now to make them settable from outside, you have to export them. So you have to add the export keyword. And this, in turn, then tells Svelte that this should be a variable that is a prop, so that it can be set from outside. Now we can use these variables in here in product Svelte just like normal variables. So for example, just as before, we can output them down there. So here we output the product title, here the product price, product price, and here the product description. Now we just have to set them here in Svelte, and we want to bind the values we stored in our local variables here in Svelte to these prop variables on our product. For that, you just go down to your product component and you bind product title, and make sure you get the casing correct, because casing does matter here, because this is not regular HTML syntax where you would not have case sensitivity. This in the end is just some markup which is first parsed and converted by Svelte before it ends up in the DOM. So here casing does matter, and I bind product title to title, product price to price, and product description here to description. And now let me reformat that to make it a bit easier to read. With all of that, if you save this now, we have this ugly card, but as soon as I start entering something here, like a book, which costs $19.99, Harry Potter, the first volume, you see all that data appear down there in our card. So the next step now just is to make sure that this only is reflected there once you hit a button up there in the form. So only once we hit a button, I want to add this product card here. Now for that, let's simply add a button below our input here in Svelte, create product. And I want to use the same styles as on the button I have here in product Svelte. Now I could copy over the styles, but copy and pasting is never that great. Instead, we should take advantage of that component architecture Svelte gives us. And therefore, I'll add a new button.svelte component. And now in here, add my button markup. Output whatever text the user wants between the button tags. And for this, we can use yet another new feature, a slot. This is a HTML element, which actually can take any other markup that's passed in from outside between the opening and closing tag of our button component and output it in here, and you'll see how it works in just a second. And then here I can also add my style tags and now copy the styles from product svelte, or cut them to be precise, and add them here to my button svelte styles. Now that's the button svelte file. To use it, for example, here in product svelte, we have to import it. So up there in the script tags, let's import button from /button svelte. And with it imported, let's use it down here instead of this button, just like this, with the opening and closing tag. And now you can enter any content, a text node, or a more complex markup between the button tags here. And whatever you have between your button tags here, where you use the button component, will be used as a value for this slot placeholder here you have in the button component. Slots are a default JavaScript and DOM feature. You use them in web components too, but Svelte takes advantage of them, and when it parses the button component, it understands that this will be a placeholder for whatever you're putting between your component tags here. Now I can use that same button component in the app svelte file. So here I'll also import button from /button svelte. And now if I use that instead the normal button tags, please note that they start with a capital case, as all your custom components should, because that allows Svelte to tell them apart from the default HTML elements. So now if we use our button component here, we saved it, you see we have the same button in both occasions. Now let's make sure that this button is actually clickable and that it adds a new product as soon as we do click it. Now on a normal button, you could add on click, just as we added on input to our input here. But since this is a custom component, it doesn't have a click event. The button inside the custom component does though. So here we can add on click, and now by simply adding it like this, without assigning an event handler, so without assigning a function that should be triggered, it will simply forward the click event to the next parent in line. So in this case, to the app svelte and the product svelte files. So now onClick will work here. And now I just want to fire a create product function. That's a function I have yet to add. So let's quickly do that here. Create product. And in here, the goal now is to wrap all these values up and create a new product based on that data. Let's add a new variable for this, products, which can be an array of products. And in here, I'll now have a new product, which let's say is just a JavaScript object. And that new product will have a title, which holds the title variable's value as a value. It will have a price, and it will have a description, just like that. You could pick different property names here in that product object, of course. And now let's use our products array here and push the new product into it. And this should update the products array. The next goal just is to output our products array down here. Now for the moment when we start, we'll have no products. So actually now I want to output some message like no products yet. And for this we can use another special piece of markup Svelte understands, a block statement, where we use curly braces in our markup and then a hash symbol and then if. And that's a special syntax Svelte understands, where we can now add a condition. And here my condition is products length. If that is 0, so if it's empty, then I want to output some content. And you have to end the if block with /if between curly braces. So here I'll output a text, no products were added yet. And only if we do have products, I want to output a list of products here. So for this, we can add another special statement or syntax here in the if block, and that is :else. Again, that's a command picked up and understood by Svelte, and this will render some alternative content if we do have products. And there, it should be a list of products. Now a list is created with yet another block command here, and that's the each command or each instruction here, the each block. It's #each, and there the syntax is products, so the name of the variable that holds an array, and in this case that is products, as, and then a name of your choice, like product, which will hold the individual product as we're looping through that. So for every iteration, product will hold the value in products And then we close that each block as well. And now in here, I want to output my product and now populate the values here with values from the single product I'm looking at for this specific iteration. So here we have product title, product price, and also product description. Let's now save that. And let's give this a try. We see no products were added yet, and we can work on the styling in a second. And let's add a book, 1999, Harry Potter. If I create it, nothing changed. No products were added yet. So does our click listener maybe not work here? Well, actually it does, but Svelte has a very special syntax for understanding when it needs to update the DOM. It does, thankfully, not update the DOM on every keystroke. It does simply not understand that products change, because push and so on, so all these array manipulating operations like this, won't be picked up by Svelte. That has something to do with objects and arrays being reference types and the values stored in products not actually changing by the push command, because what we store here is just a pointer at this array, and this pointer doesn't change if we change the array. And indeed, Svelte simply watches for equal sign assignments here, so for value assignments. Only if products gets a new value, only then it will change or update the places in the DOM where products is used. That's how Svelte works. And again, push does not change products because it changes the array, but in the variable products, we don't store the array, but the pointer at the array, and that pointer didn't change. So what we actually need to do here is we need to assign a new value to products. This will trigger an update by Svelte, and this new value should be products concat using our products array and concatenating a new value. And here I'll concatenate my new product. And now this is a change which will be picked up by Svelte. And therefore now, if we try this again and we add our values here and click the button, now you see the card appear. And we can click this multiple times and we add more and more cards here. So that's pretty nice. Now let's work on the styling of the cards and then also finish this up by adding a simple card to which we can add our products. Now for the styling, I will simply put my cards here, this whole if block, into another section like this. And therefore it automatically should look better if we give this a quick try, because now this will actually be less big, less wide. That looks much better. And with that, let's focus on the last part and make this addable to the card. For this, I'll add a new card.svelte file, and a card here will be really, really simple. In the end, in this card, I just want to output the titles and the prices of my products. So therefore here, we could have an unordered list where I want to loop through all the items in the card. And for every item, I want to output the title and the price, let's say. And then at the bottom, we have the total price, and that should be the sum. Some quick styling here, just so that this is not super ugly. The unordered list will get a list style of none to remove the bullet points, a margin of 1 rem in all directions, and 0 padding. The list items will get a margin of 0.5 rem top and bottom, and 0 left and right, a padding of 0.5 rem in all directions, a border of 1 pixel, solid, and a light gray. And then the h1 tag with the total, I'll set the font size there to 1.5 rem and give it a margin of 1 rem in all directions. The more important part is now the data which we need. And for that, again, it's time for script tags. And we should add a prop here. That will be the items of the card. And these have to be set from outside so that we can manage them in the app Svelte component, which will be the parent component of both the product and of the card, and therefore it will have access to both components and can pass data to both components. Because that is how you typically distribute your data, unless you're using a more complex state management solution, which will also be covered in my course for bigger projects. But for simple projects, you simply lift the state up. If you have some shared state between products and cart, you put it into the parent component of both these components. Therefore, the cart component will receive the items as an input and can now output it down there. So here we can add another each block and go through our items with the, well, items as item syntax you already learned about. And then here we output item.title, assuming that we do have a title, and here item.price. Now we just need the total, and we'll take care about this in a second. Let's first of all make sure that we can add items and that we output them there. So in the app.svelte file, I'll now add a new variable here, card items, and that's also an empty array. And now this should be populated as we add items to, well, the cart. For this, we just need to know when we clicked that Add to Cart button in the product component. So let's add an on-click listener here, but the problem, of course, is we're in the product component. Now we could simply forward this with this syntax again, and now we could listen to clicks on our product here in the app.svelte file. This would work here, but in a bigger application, you might have more than one button to click on a product. Therefore, what's more helpful here is if we dispatch our own custom event. So here in the product.svelte file, I'll fire the add to cart function, which we have to add, of course, add to cart. And in here, we want to dispatch a custom event, which you can do by importing the create event dispatcher function from Svelte, so from the Svelte package itself. This allows us to create a dispatch function, which I'll store in a constant named dispatch by calling create event dispatcher. And now here, I'll dispatch, and I simply give this my own identifier, like add cart. You can choose any name you want. You can also attach data, and here I want to attach the product title as the identifier, assuming that the title here will be unique. This should be something unique, of course. You could generate some ID. Here, I'll simply assume that the title always is unique, even though we're, of course, not enforcing this in this simple application. But let's assume we would. So now I emit my own add cart event with the product title event details. And in app.svelte, we can now listen to our custom event. On add cart is now possible because we're emitting this add cart event. So here I'll then also fire a add to cart function, now in the app component. And of course, we need to add this function here, add to cart. We get an event object because we're emitting a regular event, a custom event, but still it's an event object generated by JavaScript in the end. And there we can get our title from event detail. Now let's add that to cart items, and you know how that works. We assign a new value so that Svelte does pick up this change, and we can concatenate our product with that title. For that, we just have to find it, and that in turn can be done by reaching out to our products array and using the find method, and there we have to pass in a function that finds us the relevant product. This function in turn will automatically receive each product it's looking at, and it's looking at all items in the products array. So it runs this function here for every product, and we get the product here as an input, and now we have to return true or false, indicating whether that is the product we were looking for or not. And I will return true if prod title is equal to the title I'm extracting here. Now, since I already used title as a variable here, I want to avoid name clashes and name confusion. So here I'll name this actually selected title, and therefore also selected title here in my function. Now we add this to the cart items, and it's even better if we actually create a copy of that so that we rule out that we ever mutate this indirectly, because such mutations wouldn't be picked up by Svelte. And therefore I'll wrap this into curly braces and use the spread operator to pull out all the key value pairs of this found object and add it to a new object. Now with that, we should be able to add items to cart. And for now, let's simply console log cart items here whenever we do add an item to the cart, so that we can see whether that works or not. And let's now give this a quick try and create Harry Potter here for 1999, a nice book. Create the product, add to cart, and open up the developer tools, of course. And now we see that an array is being printed here, so that's looking good. And in there, I indeed have that book. And if I add Harry Potter 2 here as another product, and I click add to cart there, we see that is now also added. Last but not least, let's output the carts. And for this, let's import the newly created cart component. So import cart from /cart svelte. And let's output that up here, also wrapped in a section maybe. Cart like this. I'll add a horizontal tag between sections so that we have some separation. Now this cart requires our items prop, right? So we need to pass that in. So let's bind items here. And items is bound to the cart items variable I'm managing here in AppSvelte. So now hopefully this outputs the cart. Right now we only see the total. But now if I add Harry Potter, 1999, a book, and I click add to cart there, it's added here. Now obviously it would be nice to calculate the total as well and also show some message if we have no items in the cart. Therefore, let's go back to the cart component. There, actually in front of price, I'll also add a $sign, so just some normal text. And now to only show this if we have items, again I'll use an if statement. And if items length is equal to 0, then I want to output some content. Otherwise, I'll output my list here. And then we have to close the if tag. And here I'll just output no items in cart yet, if we have no items in there. And now to calculate the total, we can take advantage of another cool syntax feature added by Svelte. And that is a dynamic statement here in the script tags. For that, you write $:, and you might have never seen that before. It's actually a regular JavaScript syntax. It's called a labeled statement. And you typically don't use that. You could use it in conjunction with loops and the continue and break keywords. But again, you might have never seen that because it's not really a common feature in JavaScript. Svelte hijacks it and makes sure that whatever you write after this labeled statement or after this label here, and this has to be a $sign, so whatever you write after this will be re-executed by Svelte whenever one of its input values changes. And here, we can create a new variable cart total without let. That would be wrong here, and Svelte will automatically create that variable for you. So you can just use the name here, even though we haven't declared the variable. And cart total here can simply be the summed up prices of your items here. And for this, we can simply use items reduce and then pass in a reducer function, which gets two arguments, our sum and our current value. In case you're not sure how reduce works, you find a link to an explanation below the video. We start at 0 as a default value, and then here we return a new sum, which is our old sum plus, in the end, the current value. The current value, however, is not the price, but the full product, so there we have to access price. And now this labeled syntax or statement here will in the end rerun this whole code here and recalculate cart total whenever one of the items here on the right changes. And in this case, that is whenever items changes, it will rerun this. So therefore now we can output that down there. We can output our, what did I name it? Cart total with curly braces. The $sign down here is just regular text. That is not a special Svelte syntax. And now with this, we have no items in cart. Let's add Harry Potter for 1999, which is a book. Let's also add Harry Potter 2 for 2099. And let's add Harry Potter and then Harry Potter 2. And that's looking quite good. This is getting updated, and this also is getting updated. Now that's a first quick look at Svelte and its core features, some of its core features. Obviously, Svelte has way more features than that. And in my complete course, you learn all about Svelte. You learn about form validation, advanced state management, using HTTP, some additional nice syntax features you have, because we only scratched the surface here. There is more than just if, else, and variables. You learn all about that in my course. And Svelte is pretty nice because, to be honest, its syntax is pretty straightforward to learn. It's not that complex. You can build powerful apps with it. You have this component-driven architecture, which you also find in React and in Angular. And you can also watch my comparison video where I compare Svelte to these other frameworks and libraries to find out if Svelte might be interesting for you. Now, in addition, if you need more arguments, let's actually go there and run npm run build in this project to get the final build output and see how big or small that is. And now if I reveal that in my Finder here, you will see that this bundle.js file is 11 kilobytes big, or should I say small, and that's not even gzipped. So if you gzip this, you actually end up with a 4 kilobyte big app. And yes, this is a simple application, but try building this app with React, Vue, or Angular, it will be much bigger. So the efficiency of this application, that it's quite small and that it has highly optimized and also fast JavaScript code, and with fast, I mean fast during runtime as well, that all are strong arguments in favor of Svelte.